Oh, come on!
Cut it out! If you say one more word, then the answer is no! Damn it all! 1 hour, but that's it!
Here we go!
All right!
And who are you?
You two doubled up, so we did the same. You know, just to play fair. We're a merged fighter, the combination of Vegeta and Kakarot. Vegito! And here's something new. Vegito! You may be more powerful, but you're still not a god!
I get up from the ground, from the man promise keeping it down, and it's time to decide on the action that will force the time. And I feel that I can win. On the man's I'm starting to spin, starting over once again.
Yes. Welcome to the Starting Over Podcast. I'm your host, Edward Shelton, aka Dark Logos, and this is the show where we look at the strategies, tactics, and mechanics behind the game of heroclix. I have a super Vegito episode today. We're going to get that Dragon Ball fusion going between myself and Mr. Lucas Van Hollen. Say hello to nice people, please, Lucas.
What's good?
Of course, Mr. Lucas Van Hollen is of Critical Clicks fame as the cops roll through trying to hunt him down for his excellence. They want some of that Lucas Van Hollen the insight there. So, how are you doing today, Lucas?
Oh, just living the dream. Just got up work and ready to talk about some heroclix.
There we go. All right, so today we are talking about the rules changes, and in particularly practical application. I've made a slight decision for right now not to go like this rule here changes everything. This rule here changes everything because everybody else has done that. Okay, Lucas and I are going to talk from playtest experience. And what we've seen so far. We're not going to be like, hey, this breaks everything. Even though I have personal feelings, I know Lucas has personal feelings on that. But we're going from our playtest experience. And I think that's where you, the listener, is going to get the most productive listen and also something different. Because all the other heroclix podcasts are going to go through in detail how the rules work and changes. And Lucas is a pro at the rules. So there we go. So first off, we both have had mutual plays against each other, and then also plays against other people. So let's start off with team design. What's some of the first things with the rules changes that are striking you with team design?
So, when talking about teams, there's two different categories that you have to first establish. First is if we're talking about pre-rotation or if we're talking about post-rotation, because things change drastically for each of those.
Okay.
Right? If we're talking pre-rotation, it's going to be the land of Alpha Strike teams, I feel, until July. Mostly because characters like Sakarian Iron Man, who isn't going anywhere, but he still, adds. But like Sackman, Sky Tyrant, the Flash, right? They can cross entire boards in one turn and attack and bring people with them, and then you have maggots for drop-offs, and you have chips that can make chainsaws for free, and all this stuff. So I think until July hits, you're going to start seeing just a ton of hyper alpha on these small maps. Once July does hit and things like Wonder Woman 80 rotate, because that's what we're assuming, things will calm down a little, but you still have big players like Scarlet Witch and like Sakari and Iron Man, among others. Another one is like Arachnite, who can do hypersonic with a 10 speed and other things. So I would say that the alpha isn't going to go away, but it's going to be a little bit less oppressive come then.
Yeah.
But the nice thing is you can't really play these strategies anymore where your opponent can shoot you from downtown and you can't get to them, right? Because the maps are so small that meeting people in the middle is kind of inevitable. Not to try and quote Thanos or anything, but it's one of those situations where you can't really hide, right? And we know terrain's coming. There's going to be ways for people to play terrain in certain ways, but with the changes to barrier and blocking terrain and the changes to elevated, there is not really a lot of strategy for prevent my opponent from being able to just play the game just because right now. It comes into, I can hit somebody, I can hit them hard, or I can make it difficult to hit. But at the end of the day, I think that the path that WizKids is going for is, like I said, meet in the middle and duke it out.
Yeah, I will. For the little maps, I will. You have a Thanos quote. I have a Black Panther quote from the first movie. Is the challenge is not over yet? The challenge is not over yet. The thing that I have found on the small map, and that's what I'm just calling it right now until it rotates to be the map. The thing that I found on the smaller map is once the engage happens with about a standard range, which I'm saying like 6 to 7, the fight, like there isn't a lot of like, all right, now we're out. Okay? Because if you disengage, that disengage doesn't really give you a lot of distance to be safe. You did not buy time. And that's the first thing that I noticed on the smaller maps. On the standard maps, I think one of the biggest things that I've learned so far in team building was when you are planning your engage, if your opponent has built to go across what's the standard map now, there's very little that you can do. There's very little that you can do. If you go first and you cannot traverse that map that's been selected, the only thing that you can do is pick a position, bunker down. And if your opponent can come in and deal you pain with melee sources, which I am in the belief now are going to start being more and more common, you're going to have to just pick which characters are going to be sacrificed and die. Like, that's just going to be the 100% honest truth. For me, being a person that has been examining sideboard and still having people like from my locals and other, personal friends and teammates and stuff, when we're looking at sideboard now, sideboard to me is part struggle, part like, hey, I better have a very good plan on what I'm going to do and do it well. Versus trying to cover like all options like with swap. Because having played a lot of X-Men and knowing almost the entire X-Men catalog of heroclix figures by heart by now, the mindset before with swap is you face this, you run team A. You face this, you run team B. You face this other thing, you run team C. If you face this one offshoot, you run team 1A. You face this other offshoot, you run team B1. You can't do that anymore. And I know this actively trying to build for a friend for a big event. And just letting him know, it's like, you're going to have to play swap, but it's not going to be as difficult as it was before, because the amount of options that you would have to pack in, you can't. So I was just like, this is team A, this is team B. You deal with this on this type of situation, you deal with this other team on this other type of situation. Everything else is up to you. So I think that's a key element. So let's look at some other factors that are going to affect team building. And I'm going to leave this area to you because I don't play it, which is tarot cards. Do you think tarot cards become stronger in the new format? Stays about the same, or did they get nerfed too?
So tarot is interesting. There are a lot of cards that have to do with, well, not even cards. Let me take a step back. There are a lot of game elements right now in heroclix that have to do with things like being in your opponent's starting area, right? Whether you're playing Ultron or things like the Wolverine, that I think he's rotated, but now we have Old Man Hawkeye, right? If he's KO'd and he's in your opponent's starting area after this, take another turn. And we have some tarot cards that do that as well. I think the World is one of them, right? You get a mission point for every character you have in your opponent's starting area, max 3.
And then there's Red X with the pizza oven and stuff, yeah.
And so getting over to your opponent's starting area is much easier now than it used to be. It doesn't take 3 turns or 4 turns. It takes effectively 1, maybe 2.
Mm-hmm.
So powers like that are really strong. The Pulse Wave card is one that I think people should fear, because there's a lot of characters that can Pulse Wave for very large ranges, because they just set Pulse Wave to 4, right? It's 4 squares. Mm-hmm. So if you triple perplex your range, you have a 7 range when you're Pulse Waving. That's a 15 square swing. Well, the map is a 16 by 16.
That's right? A pretty huge area.
It's the whole map, effectively. Mm-hmm. You're counting the outer row, or the outer rim is basically all you're not hitting. And I understand there's 4 center squares, so things aren't quite that simple. But the point being is you're almost hitting the entire map. So the Pulse Waves card sets your damage to 2. Right? Well, if I'm Sicarian Iron Man and I put 1 perplex into range because I've already got 2 objects, and I pull the Pulse Wave card and I run over to your team and hit the whole thing no matter where they're at, well, that's not good, right? Your whole team just took 2. So like cards like that get a lot stronger. I think that otherwise, though, the rest of the cards are going to continue to play very similarly, at least at a glance, right? Cards that like increase die rolls, or give like +3 instead of +2 on powers, or give your mystics unavoidable. Like that stuff's going to continue to play pretty normally. It is important to note that steal energy off of a starting click in mystics is detrimental now, because you have to steal energy first and then take the mystics. So things like the mystics card, the magician, I really like. I think there's going to be a lot more attacks being made, so cards like the Tower are going to be more chaotic, because all misses are crit misses. There's no theme team probs anymore.
Yeah.
People who want to watch the world burn are just going to play the Tower.
See, and this is something that I think when I played you, and we were both playing theme teams, and I'm not revealing any of our builds when I say this. You took a shot with a particular figure. I probbed. You still hit. And at that moment, I was just like, I really wish I had a theme prob right now.
Yep.
I really wish I had a theme prob right now, because while you still have statistical advantage on me, just having that extra break in case of emergency prob would have been just wonderful. And personally, at first I was like the people that were complaining about the theme prop going. I will say it's a little bit Chicken Little, okay? Actually playing it and looking at the commentary that WizKid said, I think to an effect, some of the folks that were writing that article or had their ear on that assessment was wrong. Because their viewpoint was theme prop only helps Alpha Strike pet characters or Alpha Strike teams. And the only time theme prop is used is during Alpha Strike situations. And I'm like, no, it's not. Like, realistically, theme prop is useful to when you're receiving that Alpha Strike, that you have it. Now, if you're saying like, oh, you only have 3, that's usually 3 more than a lot of teams had. In sealed, I feel it's devastating in terms of constructing a team, because how many sets just don't have probs, or the probs are highly, inaccessible. Like the only prob in the set, and I mean, you and I play team seals how many times where like there's one rare prob and one super rare prob in the whole entire set, and like that's it. You know, so I while I'm not like pitchforks and torches and burn the witch on WizKids with theme prop, I do see it sort of taking a good staple out of constructed and out of sealed. So what's your thoughts, Lucas?
Yeah, so I'm terrified about the change because it's well documented that my average dice in heroclix are very polarizing. I'm either rolling like a mad lad and blowing up anybody that I face, or I can't hit the broadside of a barn. And I understand everybody's got good rolls, they've got bad rolls, but for those listening who aren't familiar with me or haven't played against me, I definitely have below average luck when it comes to dice rolls. I just do. Roll 20 is one thing, but my in-person luck is pretty bad. And people who say, "Oh, I don't believe that for a second," play against me, and then they go, "Oh, that's what you mean." Yeah, that's what I mean.
Yeah.
And so losing theme prop sucks because now I'm forced to, as a player, basically wholeheartedly rely on multiple instances of probability control in order to even have a fighting chance in a lot of games, because I just can't roll the dice, because it's just not going to pay out for me. I'm not going to win tournaments if that happens, which means now you're going to start seeing me play teams that have 3, 4, 5 instances of probability control on them.
Yeah.
And so, like I've been playing a team that has 3, and I'm not convinced it's enough. Like I'm really not. And so and we've all played against prob walls, right? Where we get when we get into a matchup where our opponent just has like 7 probs, and then they just prob everything until we miss, and then they just can't do anything about it. It's aggravating. It's horrible to play against. And for the competitive scene, that's where things are headed, because like theme probs ensured that you had a chance at least at the start of the game, or maybe you save them for later in the game, and you have an extra thing to fall back on. But not having that, man, you're putting a lot of faith in in the math.
you're putting a lot of faith in your math, but the other issue that comes in for me, which is more of the striking thing. So I'll go into my second game on the smaller map. Is my opponent had multiple probs, and I had to use a certain game mechanic so that those probs did not affect me. And because of that, I was able to pull out ahead. I still lost that game. But without that specific mechanic, which I can't go into, he would have just propped me to freaking God knows what. And that's where it was frustrating, in that moment, I was just like, oh, wow. If I didn't have this, what would I do? Then I had another attack, and it was just like, probbed again, prob. And I'm like, okay, I miss now. Like, and a lot of people would say, well, that's inevitable. I'm like, yeah, while that would have been inevitable in most situations, at least I would have had at least 1 or 2 theme props left to help save myself. So it becomes this new, I believe part of this new era of team design is going to be attackers with utility powers. Like, you're going to see more characters that are built like Iron Man, where I have running shot, some cool attack power, defense, and then I have outwit perplex or outwit prob or enhancement prob or enhancement perplex. You're going to see more of these types of built characters being dominant because the current format is still in, topsy-turvy land and whatnot. But as the tiny map becomes standardized under these new rules, I do not see, with the loss of theme prob, people having big tent poles or attackers that also cannot perform utility. So, like, one thing that struck out to me was I have a Pauper team. I can clearly talk about the Pauper team because I brought it up on the show before. My Pauper team under Pauper rules, uncommons and commons, not Pauper Prince rules. But one thing that struck me with that team, it being X-Men, here's Bishop. Bishop has PD. Here's Sunspot. Sunspot is 11 attack, 4 damage. Bishop is a 12 attack, 3 damage. I have Cypher. I think I could swap in 2 Cyphers. So I can have all this like cool support, and then I knew I had maybe 2. I had 1 prob in one situation, or the rest of the time I was relying on theme probs and barrier. And so it was really cool because I could unload a crap ton of power, and it was a Pauper team. And when I took the Pauper team to my locals, and I was pretty fine with 3 theme probs. If I was to run that same Pauper team again, I would disassemble it, sideline, withstanding. I would disassemble it and just be like, how many X-Men have prob? Forget how much damage that I can throw down. Forget the fact that I had double barrier. Forget the fact that I had empower out the butt. Okay? And a hyper taxi. How many of these figures have prob? And then you're just sitting there and you're saying to yourself, not only do they have to have prob, and I think this is going to be the big danger going forward, do they have line of fire? So, going back to my second game, I had a prob that could not get line of fire to my attack, to the ones that were attacking me, because I needed it to make an attack. So I had to sacrifice other characters to get hit because I couldn't put my probber out there because I needed my probber to attack the next turn because I know easily my opponent's going to take out my probber. So, let's put it to you. Has target selection changed? Because that's also another thing. Has target selection changed for you so far?
Yeah. So, if the opportunity arises to take out the big guns, 9 times out of 10 I'm going to take it, right? As most players would. But what I'm finding is, I was doing a playtesting game earlier today, where the big guns are right in front of me, and there was a way for me to engage. Wasn't great, but I could do it. But instead I looked at it and went, okay, the big guns is here, but behind the big guns there is some support elements that are detrimental for this team functioning.
Mm-hmm.
So if I take out those support elements, I probably win.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I did. I went after the two biggest support elements on the board, apart from the big guns itself.
Mm-hmm.
And it turned out to be the right call. Right now, yeah, especially with no theme team probs and things could have happened. I could have missed more of my attacks. They could have hit more of their attacks. You know, if you're playing things like destroyers, they can come out at different times or better times or worse times. But on average, I feel like if the big guns doesn't feel like a surefire success, I think going after support is super helpful. Because like I was telling you that game that we played last night, right? If you would have put yourself in a position to be hit, I would have hit you, regardless of it whether or not I went down on points or not. I would have gotten rid of your support intentionally because I think it was going to hurt you more than it was going to hurt me.
Right.
And so I think prioritizing things like support is not a bad plan. When you can do it in a way that makes sense, right? And like I said, if let's say they're playing a full 175 World's Finest, well, you probably don't focus fire World's Finest if you can help it, because there's that 50-50 chance they're just going to take one damage. But let's say they're playing something like 175 Thanos. I know he's kind of fallen off for this, that, and the other thing.
A little bit, yeah.
But let's say they're playing Thanos and you're playing something like Cosmo or Beast. Well, at that point, okay, if I'm able to turn off their rollouts or their reducers, and I can reliably roll the 7s minus, right? Because it probably starts with 5 or 6s or 7s and goes all the way down to 3s and 4s. Yeah, I'm going to go for it every time. So it's about threat assessment. It's about the target selection and risk versus reward. But I think going after support is going to be the smarter place, because if they lose their perplexes, they lose their probs, they lose their outwits, right? If I'm playing a beat stick and you have no more outwits to get through my rollouts and or my reducers, I'm going to turn in the other Energizer Bunny and just keep going.
Right. And this is another element that I saw in one of my games I played, in which I told you is like, again, I'm struggling, but my opponent did a very wonderful play and just realistically hurt me pretty bad. And then I'm like, all right, I'm going to float out these 2 outwitters and we're going to go to town and let's go. And, we had a series of exchanges. I wasn't able to finish the job. And then my opponent clearly saw, I'm going to kill these outwitters. And there's not a way for me to, like in the standard map that we have now, in that situation, under previous rules, I could have, from a very relatively safe distance, negated 2 of his powers, no problem. Would not have been retaliated on without some effort. In the current situation, no. Like, I made that play without wit. He's just like, okay, cool, bro. You did that. You hurt my big character here. Now I'm going to try to flank these 2 outwitters. I may not kill them this turn, but they are going to go down. And that to me was a little bit of a turning point where some utility staples that look good now will not be good in the future. Okay? They will not be good in the future. And one of the things I will reveal, because I like her, and she has performed well, but I do not think Polaris will be a good utility figure in the future. I'm just being 100. And you're going to be like, well, why are you revealing this? I'm like, Isaac played it on his team that he went to in Florida. So, like, this is public info about it being a good figure from the Hellfire Club Gala. Okay? And it's easy to say, like, oh, well, Polaris has double TK. She can free TK. She can standard TK. She has knockback. That's going to be hot. She has outwit. That's going to be hot. She has a 10 attack. That's okay. You can bump that up. All this other good stuff. That is true in a situation in which range matters more. But in a situation where mid-ranges, and I'm saying mid-ranges are your 4 to 6 range, actually has power and impact, she is not that good and is bound to die. Like, even if you have Rogue, and Rogue is giving her toughness, or you give her Warlock, and now she has shape change, she is bound to die. Whether it's from bigger figures being able to crank out a lot of damage, or just for the fact for her to be able to TK, she needs to expose herself a bit. Or you could just say that the maps with current ranges, there's enough figures that can literally perch on a ledge and rain down fire on her. Okay? And so where I'm sort of looking at this as a defensive player is defense is icing, not cake. Defense is icing, not cake. And to make that more substantial is you have defenses, you can't hard rely on them. They may or may not be substantial. Okay? The more you invest in defense, the less of a positive experience you have. You need some, but the more that you invest, the worst experience you're going to have. Because, like, for example, like I said, giving her Warlock. Okay, so she goes from being a 40-point piece to a 50-point piece. Okay, then let's just say I put in Barrier. Okay, so that means at minimum I'm spending 10 more points for a ring and a construct. Let alone if I'm playing Egg, or if I'm playing Celisa Reyes, or I forgot.
Cecilia Reyes, you mean?
Cecilia Reyes. Sorry. Cecilia Reyes. And there's things that I said in my mind for years, so
No, you're fine.
you know, like it comes out a certain way. If I'm playing Cecilia Reyes, and then Egg, and I'm trying to think of, there's another low cost barrier for X-Men. I can't think of it right now. But if I'm running all of that stuff, okay, well, here comes a standard character that, like, let's take Sackman. Sackman could just be like hypersonic speed, super strength, boop, that one wall of barrier, crack it over her head. Okay? You could say, oh, hey, man, here's Deadpool, we're in water. Okay, here comes Sackman, here comes Sky Tyrant, here comes Wonder Woman, here comes, like, all these standard figures that just lay into her. And so, I know this sounds really weird for me to say this. The value of toughness has gone up. The value of clicks of life has gone up dramatically. The value of even just having some level of traded damage reduction has gone up dramatically. You know, that's one thing that I see, you know, after the first few games. I can't say that we're in this point where having the ultra layer, the impervious, super sense, shape change, plus additional rollout meta is here, and that's the future of defense. I can't say that. I can't also say super high defenses are here. Definitely on the tiny maps. I will, and we talked about this privately. I hold the rules are perfect for me on the standard maps that we have now. And I am fully willing to accept all the pros and cons of defense on the standard maps. Because outside of literally a handful of figures, the pacing is slowed down to where the game was about almost 10 years ago. Where it takes 2 turns to get across the map and engage. In the current format, I more feel like defense is there to obstruct until you kill something. Mm-hmm. And then that's it. It is not there to keep you safe, which is the mindset of most defensive players. I do this to keep blank figures safe. No. In the current format, you better have the chess mindset. There are pawns, knights, kings, queens, and rooks on this board. What is this piece right now? Mm-hmm. And if you don't have that mindset and understanding that those roles will change throughout the game, I think you're going to be in a losing situation. And I think a lot of pros are going to be caught off guard by not being able to recognize that we went from, military operations type heroclix to street fight. This is a street fight. It's like, I got to get my chick out this fight. But it's like, nah, man, she said too much. We coming for you and your girl. Like, that's the type of mindsets that are going on, it feels like. So go ahead. What's your thoughts to that, Lucas?
Yeah, I mean, the fundamental way that we play heroclix is changing. We know this. It's between the rules changes and the way that they've simplified and changed certain things, as well as the way that they've nerfed and buffed some others. Everybody's mindset on how they address this game is going to have to change, and it's going to have to change quickly, because things like the Kilted Classic are coming up April 15, for those who want to join. Kilted Classic in the greater Chicago area, more details to be released later.
Yay!
Or even the Rock Cup in May.
Yay!
First weekend in May. We are talking about a Silver Age event with the updated rules and smaller map availability. Mm-hmm. That is very, very terrifying, because these smaller maps are made in mind for figures to gradually lose value or values over time, right? Smaller speed values, smaller range values. Mm-hmm. Silver Age doesn't have any of that, right? Characters in Silver are going to be just as dominant as they've always been, and smaller maps are going to make them even more ridiculous. Like, look at figures like Green Arrow, right, from Elseworlds.
Yeah. Oh gosh, yeah.
TK from 1 to 5, sidestep to 7, shoot 15. Oh, I'm almost in back row. It took a lot more than that to make Green Arrow that effective on a 3x2 map. But on a 2x2, it's trivial. It's easy.
Yeah.
Right? Or even look at somebody like Mr. Oz.
Even with new rules. Yeah.
Yeah. Plus 2 all TK or minus 2 TK for your opponent. Right? Your opponent gets to TK effectively 2 squares.
Which makes it pointless.
It's like a costed sidestep. Mm-hmm. But you get to TK 6 squares. Or if you're playing Flash, 8 squares.
Which
that's
you're at the middle
map.
of the map. Yeah, you're at the middle of the map. Yeah.
That's half the map.
Yeah.
For 70 points and 2 props. Mm-hmm. That's half the map. So, like, before, if we were able to just, with one action, get a character halfway up the map on a 3x2, we'd say that's ridiculous, that's broken, that shouldn't be allowed. We can very easily do that with the 2x2 maps. You lose 8 squares. That's a long ways. Yeah. So I think that you're going to need to build teams moving forward that can take a punch and are ready to go on a split-second notice. Like, I can attack people now, I'm going. And also, and this is something I've been talking about in various channels since the rules changed with Wonder Woman 80, which is you need to diversify your damage output.
Right.
Focusing on just range or focusing on just close isn't enough. Mm-hmm. You need to have both, and preferably multiple options. Mm-hmm. Right? You need to have more than one close attacker and more than one range attacker. Because if you don't, you're going to get yourself in a situation where you're going to be completely shut down.
Yes, and the thing that I'm looking at when we're talking about that in particular, about having multiples of each, we're with the changes to support and being an old school player, you could tell, you could say like I'm Littlefoot old in terms of being in this game. Okay. When we had tent poles in the past, folks would run 2 to 3 medics to do what we could do with support now.
Yep.
Like, you roll a 6 back in the day, yeah, you would heal 6. But you roll a 6 now, twice. You're taking a character from, I'm almost dead, to back to life, full dial. Okay, that wasn't necessarily the case in the past. When we're looking at these melee engages, these melee engagers need support to sort of go back to or reposition to go to get to support. Because the melee figures have, in my opinion, 80% of the defense cracking capabilities. 80% of your defense cracking capabilities is in melee. Do you have a problem with barrier? There's super strength, and then there's quake. Just bar none. You have a problem with smoke cloud. There's super strength. Okay, like just flat out. All right, you have problem with senses. All right, yep, you're right there in melee against a outwitter that has stealth. Boom, you have outwit. You can outwit their outwit or outwit their stealth. You're right next to them. You can do that. A lot of your keys to success, I believe, are going to happen or be opened up in melee encounters. And I also believe that the role of the hypertaxi is going to evolve past the delivery. I'm going to call it the milkman system. Here's your milk, ma'am. Enjoy, and just drop off the damage. It's going to be this part of this mobile platform for your range damage. You have snipers. Snipers are still going to be part of the game because legacy cards are going to exist. And legacy characters, unless they change their viewpoint of legacy characters and the selection of legacy characters will have legacy values unless they state that they're going to be changing values with legacy characters. They can do that or they cannot do that. But don't be surprised when, legacy character got 10 range person. But when we have these delivery mechanisms and these hypertaxis and they're moving across the map, putting these, improved targeting snipers in point A to point B to point C throughout the game, making distance part of the game. And so, like, distance isn't the way it was previously, where you want to get to that midpoint of the map so if things could go bad, you could retreat and then reset the tempo, knowing that was your final stage of tempo, unless you could dance around in 180 and redo it again. Now we are in the mindset of thinking every other turn shot with snipers and taxis, or taxis are delivering our neutralizers. And that, I think, is going to be the new sort of status quo. I also think the neutralizers is going to be a very high risk, high return, high risk, high return tactic. I really do think that, because with the smaller maps, there are less places to hide. They're a lot more accessible. And, like, they didn't nerf shield. I'm on B100. They didn't nerf shield yet. Please don't nerf shield, whiz kids. please don't nerf shield, whiz kids. You're going to make me have to go back on, like, a year and a half worth of work. Don't nerf shield. But they didn't nerf shield. And since they didn't nerf shield, that means you're going to see somebody in the box, being like Goku, charging up to fire up the ultimate Kamehameha, against whoever. But also, it's going to allow for, individuals to take high damage, high risk shots away. Or if you have your nullifiers, going back to the nullifier point, if they have an aura effect, to expand their aura effect, and you just can't get rid of it. But still, going back, Hypertaxi is just like, oh, you're going to do that? Well, I got, Clayface in the gang, and now they're right here. Mm-hmm. So what are you going to do? I blocked off your Hypertaxi. They can't just up and go unless they have phasing. So what you going to do? So I think we're going to see some changes. What's real sad to me, like certain mechanics that actually would fit in this age, like Transporter, Duo, I think they would be wonderful right now. But they're not. They're not here. Even Sharpshooter. I think that mechanic would have been wonderful in this age right now. And I think they would actually, shine. But they're not here. So, but
sure.
Anyway, we already talked about theme prob. We talked about the tarot cards. There was one more team building element that I'm trying to think of, and this is what I get for doing the show without notes. Oh, okay, here we go. Items. What do you think? Currently, having had multiple months playing with starting with objects, what do you think in our current format? How do you think that that's going to affect the game with the new rules?
The game has proven to be fairly object oriented right now. It's one of those situations where I'm finding myself equipping my entire team with an object, or almost my entire team. Right? If a character doesn't have one, it feels wrong. Like I would rather play less figures and more equipment, because equipment just does so much. It makes certain characters like Destroyer and Mad Jim Jaspers much more lucrative. I don't necessarily even think there's a situation where we're reliant on our objects, right? I think we're right back to where we were when we were playing with resources, where they just didn't, for the amount of points that you're spending, they enhance the team, right? There were resources that cost upwards of 70 points, right?
It was with the idols, was it the Shazam?
No, the 70-point resources were the power batteries.
Oh, yeah. If you had everything on it in every slot. Yeah.
Yep. So the team that I'm running right now, I'm playing 35 points in equipment, I want to say, because there's one piece is free because of the Green Lantern TA, and then 1, 2, 3 other 10-point equipments, and then a 5-point equipment. I want to say that's how that is turning out right now. Something like that. It's either 35 or 45 points. That's over a tenth of my build, right? But it's worth it. It's proven to be worth it every step of the way. So I think that equipment is going to continue to ramp up and continue to be impactful, and it will be for years, more than likely.
Yeah.
Unless they start to make equipment that's weaker, but I don't foresee that happening.
I'm looking at items, and you saying about 35 points, it brings up something that happened years ago. When we had feats, and feats were unrestrained, feats could be 50, 60 points of your build. And then they made a rule that it could be no more than 1/10 of your build. And so the moment you said, I got 35 points of items, I'm like, oh, that's not that far off than how it was with feats back in the day. I think a couple of things that going forward, I see that they're going to have to do. Number one, they need to establish where the ceiling is for equipment. Okay, because we're already having, you only can have one of each equipment anyway. So where's the ceiling? So if I have the Infinity Gauntlet, if that's 50 points, that needs to be the ceiling for equipment. We're not making 80 and 100 point equipment. Okay, all right. I feel like that should be the first thing. The next thing is we need lots more 5 points equipment that makes sense, like Super Soldier Serum. That to me makes sense. Okay. Oh, now you got willpower. All right, great. I got willpower the entire dial. Let's go. Okay. We need as many like little 5 point, like low mid power objects, so that figures can get a bit more customizability. I'm also, and I know some folks are going to say this after all the stuff I said about swap and that being BS and whatnot. I feel like there should be certain characters that could dual equip. I feel like there should be, quote unquote, again, certain characters that can dual equip with a restriction. If they die, no matter what that equipment says, it's unequipped, destroy. I think that would make it completely fair. You sort of have, like, let's go to Sarkarian Iron Man, for example. Like, we never really saw that story arc where he was picking up junk, and then making his armor and whatnot. But you could just be like, well, shoot, this dude is making, where do you think this arc reactor is made of? It's like, it's the battery of a destroyed spaceship that still worked, or a hovercraft. And this arm used to be part of a construction crew robot or whatever. Things like that, yeah, it would make sense if, you had characters that had two pieces of equipment. Even though Wonder Woman Prime, she had the Green Lantern ring plus the lasso or whatever, or Wonder Woman equipment. I think that's fine. But again, I think it's like, oh, you got swapped out, poof, that equipment is destroyed. I think that's the grand balancing act that needs to be in place. And since we're sort of coming back around a little bit with sort of the team design element, there's two things that we didn't talk about. Rolling for map and theme teams, and what does that put on design, and yeah, just rolling for map and theme teams, and that theme teams don't need to be that high. And how does that change? How do you think that's going to change the players' viewpoint on team building?
Yeah, I mean, theme still has an advantage, right? It still gives a +3. Yeah. But you don't need to be playing these. I think one of the reasons why they made the change, like the more I think about it, is to kind of go, okay, people, you don't need to be playing +9, right? Like, you can, nobody's stopping you, but you're not going to get as many benefits from it, right? If you put a +10 theme team together, you're not going to guarantee map roll. You're not going to already even have a +3 over another theme team that's a +6, right? So I think that's them kind of going, all right, guys, you don't need to make theme teams as large as you've been making them, right? It's okay. You're going to get a benefit for, even if you lose map, you get to at least choose what map you're playing on. And what did I do to you? You wanted to play on a small map, presumably.
Yeah.
So you won map roll against me, and I immediately took you to a big one.
Because I chose to go first.
Correct.
Because I was I didn't want to eat that alpha, and then also, in all fairness, with the team that I was playtesting, I didn't have barrier.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
But even still, in a year and a half to 2 years' time, depending on how fast they rotate them out, that won't be an option anymore, but that's not what we're worried about right now. Right? So we have to look at it objectively to go, okay, what things do I need to determine are important to me? Do I need to go first in order for my team to function? Do I need to play on a certain map for my team to function? Do I need to at least make the first attack, right? Or can I play on any map? Can I go first or second? And can I attack first if I'm able to, or withstand a hit if it comes my way? And I think that last option, I think that's what the team designs need to start, floating towards. right? You need to be okay with going first or going second. You need to be okay with playing on any map versus any terrain. And you need to be okay with either having the opportunity to alpha or taking the first hit.
First hit, yeah.
If you can cover those bases, I think you're going to beat 75% of teams that you face, realistically. And it's not hard to build teams that do that, both themed and non-themed, right? Non-themed is easier. Non-themed is easier to build teams that way, to build a more well-rounded structure. And especially since you're losing theme team probs, the incentive to play non-theme is much, much higher, which is great. Like, people like playing non-theme because they like playing Batman with Iron Man, right? But with that being said, it's also one of those situations where it does suck that we're losing incentives to play theme teams. I wish that wasn't the case.
Right. There was something.
But it is what it is.
There was something that we had talked about during our team meeting, which was one of the things that WizKids could do is the advantage of theme team is just that all theme teams would have swap 4. Like,
yeah,
and that would be the advantage of theme team, and I believe that would be more than fair if all theme teams had swap 4, or even let's just say it's not even that strong. Let's just say it was swap 2 or swap 3. I would fully be down for that, because I can't think of a single time in all the games of HeroClix I've played with swap that the character that enabled swap ever stayed in. So, with that, we're going to wrap up today's show. And I know folks will be like, keep talking, keep giving us these nuggets, give us the more nuggets. But the issue that I've come to is, like I said, is we're having this conversation early on. This conversation is going to grow. This is, both of ours first, like outing of actually saying stuff after playing. There's a lot of more games that we have to observe. And so that's a key thing. I don't want anybody to say like, the Dark Logos and Lucas talked about it, and so this is the foundation. Even though I know there's like 50 of y'all that listen to me. But realistically, I do believe that we're at a starting point, and I know when you'll hear other people talk about it from their experiences, they're going to start giving inputs too. So for all those that listen, I hope that you got some great insights from Lucas and I. And I'm going to have another teammate on, and we're going to talk about the potential future of objects and what that should look like. But anyway, Lucas, before we go, you got any shout outs?
No, I'm good, man.
All right, I'm going to shout out Lucas. He is Lucas of Critical Clicks fame, with that awesome redhead PJ Bolin and that shiny bald man. What's his name? Scott Cramp Company Cramped. All right, so if you want to hit me up, you can follow me on Twitter. And if YouTube decides to work with Twitter again, you can email me at startingoverpodcast@gmail.com. That's startingoverpodcast@gmail.com. If you wish to opine, keep it pithy, keep it